As promised, today we're going to be talking about the solicitor's qualification route, that is, the solicitor's qualifying examination from the standpoint of a foreign qualified practitioner. Welcome back to my page, and if you're new here, my name is Mary. So now that you've decided that you want to qualify as a solicitor here in England and Wales, the next question you want to ask yourself is how to go about it, of course. But before we continue our conversation about it, I should say that whatever information I share with you guys is provided and readily available in the SRA website, which I have provided within the description box. So if you're looking to get qualified as a solicitor here in England and Wales, make sure you go through their website. They've explained the process and listed out everything and how you can apply or how you can qualify as a solicitor here in England and Wales. So yes, in order to qualify as a solicitor in England and Wales, you need to have a degree and you need to have 2 years full-time qualifying work experience, and you need to have also passed the SQE1 and SQE2. So yes, the SQE1 focuses on the legal practical knowledge side, and the SQE2 focuses on the legal practical skills. So if you're looking to qualify as a solicitor here in England and Wales, you will need to write the SQE1 and 2. But as a foreign qualified solicitor or practitioner, you can apply for exemption from either the SQE1 or 2, or both the SQE1 and 2. The SRA have provided useful information about the process for applying for exemption, and they have also provided you with useful examples that would aid you when preparing your application. But before you go ahead to apply for exemption, you will need to have created your SRA account and then verified your ID, and you would also need to include all your qualification certificates within your profile. So if you're qualified to practice as a solicitor in more than one jurisdiction, you will need to add and include those jurisdictions. So if you scroll down on the list here on this page right now on the screen, you will see the list of jurisdictions that can apply for exemption. So you need to make sure that your country is on that list. If your country is not on that list, it doesn't stop you from applying for exemption. You can do so, you can still apply for exemption. But if your country is on the list, make sure you've added it within your profile. So let's take, for example, Nigeria. You click Nigeria and you also write the date you obtained your qualification. And if you are qualified in Ghana, for example, and you're also qualified to practice as a solicitor in Nigeria, or you're also qualified to practice as a solicitor in Canada, for example. So you have to add all those three countries and include your qualification certificate from all those three countries within your profile. Now that you're successfully completed and created your account and uploaded all of your relevant qualifying certificates, you are now ready to apply for exemption. So take for example that you want to apply for exemption from the SQE1 assessment. You need to show in your application that your experience is not substantially different in content and standard from that which the candidate taking the SQE1 will be assessed on, and that it is comparable to level 3 of the threshold standard for solicitors. Now, as you can see on my screen, level 3 of the threshold standards covers your ability to identify legal principles relevant to the area of practice. You must also provide evidence of how the law in your jurisdiction is not substantially different from the law in England and Wales. And as you can also see on my screen, it is not sufficient for you to just state that on your application. It is not okay for you to just write that your experience or the law from where you are from is the same or similar with England and Wales. You need to have evidence that corroborates how similar the law is. And then you also need to show in your application that your qualification requires you to adhere to a code of conduct or rules of professional ethics that is similar or not substantially different from the code of conduct that applies to solicitors here in England and Wales. Candidates writing the SQE1 assessment will be assessed on FLK1, which covers business law and practice, dispute resolution, contract, torts, legal system of England and Wales, constitutional law and administrative law, EU law and legal services. For FLK2, candidates will be assessed on property practices, wills and administration of estates, solicitor's accounts, land law, trust, and criminal law and practice. So, if you're applying for the SQE1 exemption, you need to also show this in your application that your experience covers this area of law and that it is not substantially different from that in England, from the law in England and Wales. The SRA has also provided you with examples and samples on how you can show your experience in your application. So if you look at the screen right now, you would see that they've provided you a table that shows you what you're looking at. So the area of functioning legal knowledge. Tell us how these areas are covered by your qualification. If these areas are covered by another qualification or experience, please tell us. And they've given you examples on how to do so. So if you look further down in the table, you would see, for example, property practice. They've said investigation of a registered and unregistered freehold title. They've given you example of how you can give a broad overview of your knowledge and the skills you have developed, providing specific examples to illustrate. So make sure that you also provide examples there. So they've told you the type of examples that you can use as your evidence. So they've said you can use a reference or a work sample, but they've also made a very important point with it, which is redaction. For those of you that are not aware of what redaction is the process of removing information from a document. So those information could include confidential information, sensitive information, personal data. That is what redaction is. So when you are making and writing your application, please ensure that you remove every information that you consider confidential, you consider sensitive or personal data. For example, when you're writing your application, you do not need to say in the case of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. No, you can say anonymize the information, and you could use statement like in the case of Mr. A against Mr. B, blah blah blah, and give details of what the case is. But ensure, and I say it again, ensure that you remove information and sensitive information or information that you consider personal. Make sure you take your time to proofread your application and that you've done a good job in removing your application sensitive information from your application. Another important part of your application is your reference. You would need to provide a reference for the number of years you've claimed within your application. So if you've claimed to have, for example, 5 years of qualifying experience within your application, you will need to provide a reference that can corroborate what you've stated in your application. So let's take for instance, if you've worked in multiple organizations within 5 years, you would need to provide, and let's say you worked somewhere for 2 years and 3 years for the other place, you will need to provide a reference for the first 2 years, and that person must be your supervisor. That person must have supervised you while you were working in that organization, whether a firm or a solicitor's firm or a chambers. And for the other 3 years, you'd also need to provide a reference for that organization as well. So within your application, you would have provided their contact details and email address. So on the note of email address, make sure that the email address you're providing is not a Gmail email address. You're not providing, like, for example, mariadekonya@gmail.com. No, make sure it is the email address attached to the firm. So if you're saying you've worked in H&H solicitors, the email address has to be, let's say your supervisor is Mr. Smith. Your email address has to be Mr. Smith at H&H solicitors. You cannot provide a Gmail address because it is going to be very difficult to verify that email address and verify that it is actually a business or it's actually a firm's email address. So you need to have like a workable email address that you're submitting within your application. And secondly, when you're providing your references, and if, for example, your referee that you've provided is also, if your reference or if your referee is also a legally qualified individual, and let's say it's a solicitor or a barrister, and that person supervised you while you were working in that organization, you will need to also submit the qualifying certificate for that individual. Then that individual will also need to submit a certificate of good standing from the Law Society, or let's say in the case of Nigeria, from the Nigerian Bar Association. You would also make sure that the letter from your reference or from your referee, in this instance, is a letter-headed paper, is on a letter-headed paper. Don't just submit like a plain document. It has to be a letter-headed document, and that reference should have been issued to you within the last 3 months from the date you're applying for exemption. So yeah, so that's all about references. So let's move to SQE2. Candidates taking the SQE2 assessment will be assessed on client interview and attendance, advocacy, case and matter analysis, legal research, legal writing, legal drafting, criminal litigation, dispute resolution, property practice, wills and intestacy, and business organization. So candidates sitting for the SQE2 will be assessed on all those subjects. So if you intend to apply for exemption from SQE2, you would have to show in your application that your experience is not substantially different, or the experience or the law in your jurisdiction is not substantially different from that in England and Wales in those specific subjects. Everything that we've said when it comes to references and redaction and how to set up your account and create your account from the start of this from the start of our conversation also applies here for SQE2. So like I said in the beginning of our discussion, most individuals have gotten exemption for SQE2, and only one individual has gotten exemption from SQE1. So make sure you do, or you write your application well. Give very, very good examples, and when giving your examples, make sure you remove sensitive information from your application, and do as much as possible and try as much as possible to provide valid references within your application, because your references are there to corroborate your application and everything you've said within your application or stated within your application. Your references also have to proofread your application and confirm that everything you've stated is true, or everything that you've stated is correct from their own knowledge. So yeah, that's everything about SQE. And thank you very much guys for listening and sticking with me throughout the whole video. I hope you have found this information very helpful, and if you're intending to become a solicitor here in England and Wales, I hope you've learned something from this video as well. But like I said, I'm not taking the solicitor qualification route, I'm taking the barrister qualification route. So everything that I've shared with you guys today is based on everything that I have read on the SRA website, which shows that the SRA have done a very good job in breaking down the process and giving you guys useful information on how to apply, and even going as far as giving you guys examples on what you can use as evidence when applying for exemption. So please guys, please visit the SRA website if you're intending to become qualified as a solicitor here in England and Wales. And thank you guys again for listening. Please don't forget to leave a comment, and if you have any questions for me, also drop a comment as well. Don't also forget to subscribe. See you guys in my next video. Bye.